Hi, I'm Christina, and this is Desert Agave Fiber Arts. I'm a Latinx, fat, bipolar writer and fiber artist with PTSD. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I grew up in Wisconsin, but I've lived in New Mexico since 1998. I've been a writer, it feels like, since forever, and I began exploring the fiber arts just in 2021. Exploring my creativity through the fiber arts has reinvigorated my writing practice and in my life led me away from trauma and depression and towards joy. In this podcast, I'll primarily discuss knitting, spinning, and wool processing, and sometimes sewing and embroidery, and often mental health. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any of these things, but the process of discovery, experimentation, and wild leaps into the dark bring me joy, and I hope to share that with you. Hi, it's almost noon on the 12th of September, 2024, and I'm here for the 4th episode of Desert Agave Fiber Arts. I did a little mental health check-in last time, telling you that the reason why there had been such a gap between episodes was because I had a rough summer. And just to check in briefly about that, I've really been feeling better and better just with time, and I think my creative practice has helped a lot. I can tell I'm feeling a lot better right now because I had some challenges in the family, just like an illness going around. And the start of the school year always brings some bumps with my kiddo. And I've been able to weather those just fine. They haven't brought me down. I deal with things, but I still stay well within myself, and I'm still able to do the things that I like to do. I've been pretty busy with my writing right now. This is kind of my busy season for my volunteer job. I help write the materials for the annual pledge drive for my Unitarian Universalist Church, and the pledge drive is coming up, so I've been finalizing materials and getting things done, and that honestly has felt good. And my playful making that I talked about last time has started to become more purposeful. Still with that element of play in it, but I find myself playfully thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if I could get this thing done by this time? Which is definitely a change from where I was at this summer. And I will talk about this more later, but I've been starting to think about garments again and what I'd like to make next. Okay, like usual, I like to start with a finished object story time. I don't have any recent finished objects today. None of the works in progress I showed you last time have been completely finished by today, but I do have a pillow I'd like to show you. I embroidered this pillow and then sewed it up into a pillowcase, this project is something that really led me from one part of the fiber arts to another. So the pillow is cross-stitched. I really think it's lovely. It's a lovely design. I believe I've talked about her before, but this was designed by Krista West of Avlia Folk Embroidery. And this kit is for her Baltic scroll cushion. And it's a really nice pattern for someone who's new to cross-stitch, because if you notice, every row only has one color in it. So there's a little bit less to keep track of as you're working on it. It's very meditative, and the result, I think, is quite lovely. And I worked on this. I had done some embroidery of her designs before I did this. I think this was the first really large cross stitch that I took on. And I really enjoyed it a lot. And the process of sewing it into a pillowcase is what led me to my next fiber art. I would show you the back of this pillowcase, but it's covered in cat hair, and I just don't want to share that on the internet, so we'll just look at the front. But I'm going to put it down for a little bit. Both of these are made from, both the front and the back are made from kits that Krista West has on her website. There's the Baltic Scroll kit, that's the front that I showed you, and then she also has backing kits, which are basically more plain fabrics pre-sewn in so that you can very easily make them into an envelope backing for a pillow. And I bought one of those kits, and I used her directions for how to sew it to the cross stitch that you'd made. And the thing is, I didn't have a sewing machine. So she said you could do it without a sewing machine, and she wasn't lying, she was right. And so I ended up sewing this pillow all around the four sides by hand. I think I did a pretty good job. You can't really tell that it was hand sewn, but it was. But the thing is, it took me all day. I think it took me an entire Sunday. It was hours and hours of just painstaking hand sewing work. And it occurred to me at some point while I was doing these hours of hand sewing that if I just had a sewing machine, I probably could have gotten those 4 seams done in 5 to 10 minutes tops, maybe even less than that. And that is what got me thinking, I wonder if in addition to learning how to embroider and to cross stitch, I wonder if I could learn how to sew. It's the first time it honestly occurred to me. And at first, my only purpose was so that when I finished my cross stitches and embroideries into usable things like pillows, that I wouldn't have to do it by hand. But I started poking around the internet and asking friends about it. This was 2021, so friends were still mostly online at that point, not in person. And I asked if there was anyone in town who had a sewing machine they weren't using that they'd like to lend me or sell me. No one did, but a couple people pointed me to places in town where you could buy sewing machines. And one of them was a local quilting shop called Hip Stitch that sold some modern sewing machines, but also some featherweight sewing machines, some Singer, I think it's Singer 221, otherwise known as featherweights. And I had no idea that people still use sewing machines that were almost 100 years old, sometimes actually 100 years old. And that was amazing to me. The idea that these machines existed, that they still worked well enough that you could actually use them to sew something, and that they were that old, I was immediately captivated. Plus they're beautiful, and one thing you'll learn about me is I am a sucker for a beautiful tool. And kind of before you know it, it's right behind me there. It's black, it's got pink thread on it, and it's under a plastic case. I brought home my Singer featherweight. And that is how I learned how to sew. I learned how to thread it, and I started by sewing a couple of shaky little bags, and I pretty quickly got to a point where I knew I could sew a pillowcase. But as I was working, that was the first time it occurred to me that I could make clothes to clothe myself. And I started kind of poking around on the internet, wondering, were there patterns that would fit me, that I liked, that would work? And I found out pretty quickly that my body was bigger than most patterns. Even plus size patterns didn't go up often to a 65-inch hip size. And that's what eventually led me to finding the pattern makers Muna and Broad. And they were really the ones who, through their videos and their patterns, taught me how to sew garments. And that was really formative, and it's still something that I'm so grateful for. And it all started with my Baltic squirrel pillow and wishing that I didn't have to sew it up by hand. All right, let's move on to works in progress. So first of all, I'll start with the thing that I spent the most time working on, and that is Who Could Stay. I showed you this last time. Last time I had basically turned it into a vest, and I was pretty pleased with that. And basically, I found myself thinking as I worked on it, wouldn't it be cool if I could get this done by my husband's birthday? Wouldn't that be fun? And I started working on it, not on anything else. Every time I had time to do some making, I would work on my Who Could Stay. My husband's birthday, I'm not going to tell you exactly when it is, but it's in less than a week. And I thought, yeah, I can just get the 2 sleeves done real quick and then do the collar. It'll be done by his birthday. That will be awesome. That would be awesome. But, you know, I worked on it, and I think I've said before, I'm just not that fast. And Tuesday morning, I took a long, hard look at how far I'd gotten, and this is how far I'd gotten. It's pretty neat. I'm proud of it. This is a set-in sleeve, and it's done with short rows. You pick up stitches, do short rows to kind of make the sleeve cap. I'm now at the point where I'm in the round and I'm just doing the occasional decrease. Really happy with my progress, but I realized There was literally no way that I was going to get both sleeves and the collar done by his birthday. I briefly thought maybe just one sleeve and a collar, so it's almost done. That would be cool by his birthday. And then I thought some more about it, and I thought, first of all, no. Pretty sure I'm not going to get that done either by his birthday. Second of all, the highs right now are still right around 90 degrees. That's an improvement because all summer the highs were around 100 degrees. But 90 is still hot enough that there is no way that he is going to want to wear this beautiful wool sweater anytime around his birthday. So why not just get it done on a more relaxed pace? Why not work on some other stuff instead? So that's what I decided to do. This is not on hiatus, but it is waiting until I get a couple more things done, because I do, like I said last time, I have a silly number of works in progress, and I'm suddenly at a point where I thought it would be fun to have less works in progress and more finished items that I can give or I can use. So that's what I'm focusing on now. So this is the closest thing I have to a finished object, and that is, it's a Rodin mitt designed by Isolde Teague. And as you can see, this one, it needs its ends woven in, but it is done. And I'm really pleased with it. As I said last time, I did something I've never done before for this, which is I graded it up by myself. This pattern goes up to a size XL, which is supposed to fit a 9-inch circumference hand. The person I'm making it for told me that his hand was about 11 inches around. And so I thought, okay, I'm not sure this 9-inch one's gonna work. And I ended up grading it up to a size XXL and a size XXL. I started making the size XXL, but I just felt like I just got the cuff done of that in that size. I thought, that seems too big. I mean, I know what this person looks like, and I didn't think that what I had come up with for a XXL was gonna fit him at all. And I also figured with this ribbing, there's quite a lot of stretch and give. So I used my numbers for the XXL. And I'm pretty confident this is gonna fit him. My hand is about a 9, so for myself, I would make her largest size. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of give for a larger arm, larger wrist, larger hand. And also, of course, for my own, I wouldn't make the thumb or the fingers probably quite this long. Although this would be wearable for me, because one thing that's nice about this mitt is you can fold things down when you don't need it to cover everything. It's quite handsome, I think. And then if it's really cold and you just want as much coverage as possible, you can fold it up. I think I probably am going to make a pair of these for myself at some point. I've even got the yarn I would use for it. It's the same kind of yarn. This is Rama Garn yarn, and I've got it in this really nice brown, and I would like to, at some point, hopefully this winter, make myself a pair using the brown wool. This is a nice dark gray. So not only did I finish the thumb on that one, but let me find it. This morning, in the wee hours, I cast on the second mitt so that I would not get second mitt syndrome. Didn't get that far on it, but as you can see, I've started the ribbing, and this pattern's a pleasure to work on. So I really feel like this is gonna fly. I really enjoy it. And I'm using something that's new to me that I'm enjoying a little less for the ribbing, which is done in a smaller needle size than the rest. I am using, let's see, Haya Flyers, which I've never used before. They're flexible double-pointed needles. So as you can see, there's a lot of flex here. That's because these two little needles are connected by a cable. And then you use a third needle, just like with double-pointed needles, to knit. And with these three, you basically do with what you would do with traditional double-pointed needles. You would need 5 of them. For this, you only need 3 because they're nice and flexible. It's a cool concept. I think I need a longer tip. These tips are pretty short. I don't know how much they are, maybe 3 inches. And I could do it, but it's not that fun. I'm looking forward to getting to the end of the small ribbing section so I can move on to doing magic loop with my larger needles for the rest of the mitt. I also showed you last time a pair of colorwork mitts, the Selbu mitts designed by Skein Knits, and those are on temporary hiatus. I am planning to work on them, but I want to get the other 2 mitts I'm working on done first. So I'm prioritizing these. I'm prioritizing this, and this is something that I can really just kind of get in a groove and work on. They're pretty simple. It's just simple ribbing. And then the other one I'm working on is my test knit, Alma's mitts. Like I said last time, they're designed by Kavitha Raman, and this one takes a little more thought. And what I realized was that it took the same kind of thought that the color work was taking for me, and I just felt like I didn't have room for 2 mitt patterns at the same time that are using the same kind of knitting thinking brain and learning new skills brain. So I figured, since this is the test knit with a due date, I would focus on these first. So I finished the ribbing. It's about where I was last time. This is where I am now. And as you can see, there's this beautiful twisted stitch pattern. I finished the first repeat of the pattern and the chart that she gave, and I'm ready to start on the thumb gusset. I'm definitely going to have this 1 mitt done by the 23rd, which is the due date for the test knit. Hopefully quite a bit before then, I think. I mean, this progress that you see, I got this done this week, starting Tuesday, and today's Thursday. So, this wasn't the only thing I was working on this week. Anyway, it's really a pleasure to work on. This is my first time doing a pattern with twisted stitches, and I'm enjoying it. It's a tiny bit fiddly, but I'm using these Hayahayas, and I love their super sharp tips. And that makes the fiddliness a little easier. And I really think the fit is working out nicely. Let's try to get this on. So you can see how it's looking. It's really going to be gorgeous when they're done. I always get cold hands when I'm driving my son to school in the morning in the winter. And these are going to be perfect for those mornings. Going to get a lot of use. I've been having an interesting time test knitting, where she's working on the thumb gusset right now. And she had emailed me asking how the size was working out for me, because I'm doing the largest size. And I had to confess that I was actually just about to start the thumb gusset. I hadn't done it yet. And I felt bad I wasn't further along, but it turned out that was perfect because she's tweaking possibly some of the instructions for the thumb gusset. So I get to kind of use her tweaked instructions and report to her how they're working, and that will influence the final pattern. It's cool. I've done other test knits before, always for garments. And this is the first time I've done a test knit where there's been more active tweaking of the pattern. But honestly, I find that interesting and fun. And since it's a mitt and not a sweater, that makes it less stressful for me. Also, it's interesting to me because I mentioned that I graded the Rodin mitts up a size for my friend. And since I had just done that and was thinking about, geez, you know, do I need to grade all these numbers up the same? Do thumbs really get that much bigger compared to other things? That kind of thing. It's interesting watching an actual designer go through that same thought process as she grades her mitts. So I'm really getting a lot out of it. It's funny, I thought I was kind of silly to be working on multiple mitts at once, but it turns out that in my head and in my learning, they're really talking to each other. And like I said, I'm more purposeful with them, really trying to get them done as soon as I can, but also having a lot of fun. I love to learn, and I'm learning a lot with these. Okay, I also worked on my older work in progress, the classic LBD. It won't look like I did much, but I felt like I did a ton. So this is the bottom. This stitch marker, I put it where I was the last time we talked 2 weeks ago. And as you can see, I did a little more than an inch since then. Doesn't sound like much, but this is fingering weight yarn. And it's like, you know, it's actually a decent number of rows. And then also I increased out from my hips. I don't remember exactly how many stitches are on it at this point, but I think it's like around 400. So it takes me a long time to get through a row, basically, and took me a long time to get this much done. I have every 10 stitches I have marked, and then also lower down I have marked when I did increases. At this point, I'm done with the increases for my hips. I'm just knitting around in circles until I decide it's time for the ribbing. So I'm basically at the point where it's like a giant sock, and it's just my mindless knitting. And that's actually when I worked on it the most, was this past weekend. I got the updated COVID vaccine, and I didn't get sick from the vaccine this time, but I basically slept for a day and a half. It was really a very weird feeling. I would wake up, knit on this for a little bit, fall back asleep, wake up, fall asleep, go to bed at night, sleep, a full 7-8 hours at night, and then spent the next day, I think I took 6 naps on Sunday. But when I wasn't napping, I was working on this, and when I was napping, this was in my lap, and often it was in my hands, and I was like mid-stitch when I fell asleep. So it felt like I worked on it for a day and a half, but well, anyway, this is how much work I actually got done the rest of the time I was sleeping. And then finally, the last thing I've been working on is another pair of socks. I tried to not cast anything on. I really wanted to just work on the things I already had going, but it felt super weird not having a sock on the needles. I guess I'm one of those knitters who always has a sock going. So I cast something on, and I am enjoying the heck out of it. It's a new thing. As you can see, it's just a long tube, and then there's these like weird strings hanging down periodically. So what I'm doing is I'm using a method I've never used before, using a new book. It's Knit 2 Socks in 1 by Sophia Talley. And it's this cool method that she outlines where basically you just take your sock yarn and you knit a big long tube, but then periodically you put in these lifelines with scrap yarn. And then when you're done, you go back and you use one of them to cut the whole thing in half into 2 socks. And then for one sock, you knit a toe, and for one sock, you knit a cuff. And then there's other lifelines you've placed that you go and you cut open. Okay, sorry, my camera froze, and I'm not sure at what point it cut me off at. I'll have to edit these together. But again, these are lifelines, and you use them to cut the sock in half, to insert a heel, to add a cuff on one and a toe on another, and you get a finished pair of socks. The book, I like it a lot. She's really useful, outlines things about how many stitches to use for what size foot you have and what gauge of yarn. And it's got a lot of useful information that I can tell I'm going to be using, not just when I do her method of sock. This yarn is really fun too. Check out this self-striping yarn. I bought it this summer and I'd been itching to use it. It's Opal yarn, and Opal does this cool thing where they have yarns based on artists' work. And this is not an artist that I'm familiar with, but this is the painting that the yarn was based on. So you can look at the yarn and the painting. It's just so fun. And I'm really enjoying the fabric that it makes as you knit. It makes it really fun because I've mostly used self-striping yarn where the stripes are fairly chunky. But here, I mean, the color changes sometimes every few stitches, and that just makes you keep wanting to go and go and go. This isn't my primary project. I worked on it a lot. For the Labor Day weekend, we went to the mountains, and when we were driving around in the mountains or sitting around in the cabin we rented, I worked on that quite a bit. And right now, it's kind of my emergency purse knitting. I keep this in my purse, and anytime I'm out and about and there's time to knit, I grab that time and I work on my tube of sock. Really, it's just the method is fun in part because, it's really mindless knitting until you do the after work where you insert the heels and such. So you're just knitting in a little tiny circle, and I'm using a new to me needle. It's an Addi Easy Knit Rocket in US size 1. This is the package for it. And it's nice because it's a tiny little circular. I don't think it's a 9-inch. I think it's, does it say here? Yeah, it's a 10-inch circular. And that is because one needle is a little bit longer than the other. And that slightly longer needle, I hold it in my right hand, and that makes the knitting process much more comfortable for me. And it means that you can just knit and knit and knit without even thinking, because you're just knitting in circles, and you don't even need to fiddle periodically like you do with DPNs or a magic loop. You just knit in infinite circles with these clever little needles. So it's a good, relaxing, I'm waiting in line and I have nothing to do kind of a project. My one complaint with the Addy needles that I'm using is I wish they were pointier. I'm really kind of a pointy person. Hayas are some of my favorites, and but even with the duller point, I'm still enjoying using them. Okay, next, some future plans. So the big one, like I said, is to finish my mitts. I want to finish the Alma's mitts and the Rodin mitts ASAP. And then I'll start working again on the colorwork mitts and also on my garment works in progress. I really want to get some of these garments done because I'm starting to itch to cast on something new, but I have promised myself I'm not going to cast on a new garment until I think until I've got at least one, maybe two of the 3 done. We'll see. I'm still debating in my head. I mean, my thought is with garments is it'll be good for me to have a harder project going and an easier project going. So like right now, my husband's sweater is sort of my harder project because there's the all over texture and I'm doing things like set-in sleeves I've never done before. And the classic LBD is the easier project because it's all stockinette and also it's a pattern I've done before once. So I guess once I finish my husband's sweater, I feel like I'll be able to cast on something else that's a little more challenging. And that I'm pretty set is going to be the One Wild Forest Finds cardigan. I talked about it last time. It's knit in pieces, and they're not even clear-cut pieces, like here's the front pieces and here's the back piece. It's a slightly different construction and it has pockets, but you knit it in pieces and each piece has a different texture pattern, maybe with a different gauge that you have to swatch for. So it's really going to be a little more of a long-term project. I think it's one I'm really going to enjoy, but it's going to take a while, and it's going to be what I work on when I really want to turn my knitting brain on. So I've been thinking about what I would like to do once the classic LBD is done as, again, my easier project. I've debated on a lot of things, but as of today, I'm really thinking hard about doing The Blossom by Anne Valley. That's a new pattern. It's literally released today. Anne Valley is the dyer who does Little Skein yarns. Little Skein and the Big Wool, I think is the full name. And I love her yarn. I'm part of her yarn club, so every 2 months I get a skein of her beautiful yarn, and that's what I'm using in the blanket I'm working on, the Stella blanket that I mentioned last time. And I like the pattern. It's got cables on the arms, but other than that, it's mostly stockinette. It looks like it's raglan construction, which I'm familiar with. So it looks like it would mostly be pretty relaxing, and it would be something I would enjoy wearing. And it just looks like a pattern that I think I could make and enjoy wearing and enjoy making without straining my brain too much. So really considering it. Here's what I'm not sure about, and that is what yarn I would use. Like I said, I want to use yarn from Stash, and I've got some options. I've got some Patton's worsted wool in Stash that I got for a really nice price just this summer. I've got some in light gray and some in sort of a dark mulberry pinkish color. Either of those would make a beautiful blossom sweater, I think. But I've wondered about my third garment work in progress that I've never showed you before. And this is, I'm working on a Trinnigan cardigan by Andrea Mowry. I affectionately named it from the start my Swamp Witch cardigan. Because I don't know, I just imagined that once it's done, it's going to be this big, oversized, pink and orange and green cardigan. You can see the colors change. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I imagined it was like something a swamp witch would wear. It hasn't gotten a ton of work, as you can see. I've had it on the needles about as long as the classic LBD, and there's very little done. And that's because even though I love the idea and I love the yarns that I'm using, somehow I'm not in love with the sweater. I like it, but I have a hard time convincing myself to work on it. Part of me thinks I should just keep working on it, and because I'll be thrilled to have it and wear it. But part of me is wondering, I've got the sweater quantity of this yarn, and this is Anne's yarn. I bought this about 1.5 years ago, a sweater quantity. It's the exact kind of yarn she designed the blossom to be in. It's a worsted weight, targy wool that she dyed, this really lovely green. And I've wondered, should I frog the Trinnigan and use this in the blossom instead? Or should I keep going with the Trinnigan and use the Patton's yarn in a blossom? I don't know. And I've got time to decide. I don't have to decide now. But if you have any opinions, feel free to let me know. What do you think? Swamp Witch cardigan, yes? Or Swamp Witch cardigan frog? And then find another use for both yarns. The yarn is, oh, I didn't do my homework on this yarn. It's a color changing yarn. That's really a lot of fun. That's like pinks and oranges, and there's some yellows and purples. And I've got a sweater's quantity of it. And I think it's Junction Fiber Mill. I'll change it in the notes if it's a different name, but I believe that's who makes this yarn. It's a DK weight. And so if I ended up frogging the Trinnigan and using the green yarn for a blossom, I would have some pretty exciting yarn to use for a different project someday. I don't know. I'm torn. So yeah, if you think I should keep working on the Swamp Witch cardigan, let me know. All right, and then the final thing that is in my future plans is, as the weather keeps getting cooler, I am absolutely going to be spending more time in the wool room spinning and playing with my brand new to me tool slash toy. I literally just brought it home about 1.5 hours ago, and that is that I got myself a drum carder. So I'm going to be scouring some wool. I have 2.5 fleeces that need to be scoured that I'm looking forward to tackling. And when they are scoured, I will have a drum carder to process them on, which is so cool. I'm so excited. So yeah, that's I'm definitely going to be spending some time working on that. So in 2 weeks, I hope to have some fun wool processing adventures to report. The drum carder, it's a Strouch drum carder. I got it used, and I was pretty tickled. I've been looking on Facebook Marketplace for quite a while for used drum carters anywhere in the New Mexico area, and haven't really seen much. But maybe a month ago, I saw this Strouch carder listed, and it was by someone in Colorado. And I looked up online how long of a drive it was between here and where she was, and it was a 6.5 hour drive. And I just thought, no, there's no way I can convince my family to do a 6.5 hour drive to get this drum carder. And one thing I haven't shared here yet, but is very true, is I have a highway driving phobia. So the chances of me driving 6.5 hours to get this drum carder by myself were basically non-existent. So I sent the seller a message, and I just said, I'm interested in your drum carder. I live in New Mexico. I can't make the drive. So if you ever find yourself in my parts, please send me a message, because I'd love to buy the drum carder from you. And she said she'd keep that in mind. And then about 2 weeks later, she messaged me and she said, I found a ride for the drum carder. Do you still want to buy it? And I looked into it some more and asked her some questions. And I said, yes, please. So that drum carder got a ride on Monday down with a fellow named Steve. He drove it down in his big truck, and we connected on the phone, and today we met in a parking lot in front of True Value Hardware, and he put it in the back of our car. It was kind of funny. He didn't even know what it was. He said, what is this? So, I mean, he just knew he was carrying down this kind of weird looking machine for a friend of his. He did not know what it was, but I'm awfully grateful to him because now I have a drum carder in the wool room, and I hope in 2 weeks when I record my next episode to record it from the wool room so I can introduce you to the drum carder and talk a little bit about the adventures that we've had. Finally, before I wrap up, I wanted to share something, and that is just, if you haven't listened to the audio podcast, Haptic and Hue, and you're interested in the fiber arts, definitely check it out. Haptic and Hue, the latest episode, interviews Elizabeth Wayland Barber, who's the author of a book called Woman's Work, The First 20,000 Years. This book's about 30 years old at this point. I read it last year. It was one of my favorite books I read last year. And she was pretty revolutionary in that before she did her work, people kind of assumed weaving and fiber arts type stuff was probably invented by the Egyptians maybe 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. And she's the one who looked at the data that was out there that people weren't really paying attention to. And she said, no, this is not what happened. People have been making textiles, have been spinning, string and yarn of certain kinds, basically since we were human beings. That's part of actually what got me into spinning with spindles, was reading this book, because just the idea that people have been doing spinning on some kind of spindle basically since we were people, I love that. I can't even, it's hard for me to put into words on the spot why I love it, but I love it. And that is why I spin, because I want to do a practice that has been going on since we were people. And she argues that the Stone Age should be called the Age of String. And it's a fascinating book and it's a fascinating interview. So I highly recommend that you listen to Haptic and Hue's interview of Elizabeth Wayland Barber, and then get your hands on Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years, and check it out, because I do not think you will be disappointed if fiber arts are a thing that you're interested in. And that's my episode. So to wrap up, please like, subscribe, and comment. The liking and the subscribing, I hear, helps other people find this podcast, and I love the commenting. And the reason why I do this is to be a part of the online fiber arts community, and getting feedback and having conversations with you is really a pleasure, and I appreciate every single comment that I get. Thank you to all the people who have subscribed. Like I always say, the fact that you are subscribing and you are watching means that I'm not just talking to my camera, I'm talking to actual people, and that's a lot more fun. And I really hope to see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you can find me at my author website. You'll see that, the link below in the show notes. Also, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm C. Jovovich. Again, you'll find that in the show notes. If you do follow me on Instagram, watch for an interesting announcement next week. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it's going to be, but just so you know, I'm going to be a guest related to the fiber arts on a different podcast that I've admired for quite a while, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I'll tell you what exactly that is on Instagram next week when the time is right. And with that, thank you. I really appreciate you being here, watching this, getting to the end, and I'm just going to say bye.